Imagine a person who has just completely given up on the idea of a perfect world.
Right.
Someone who, looks at the news, sees all the chaos, and decides that striving for an ideal society is just this naive, childish fantasy.
Yeah, we see that kind of cynicism everywhere today.
You really do. But according to a highly provocative new essay we're exploring today, that person, the one who has abandoned the dream, is actually no different than a rat living in a gutter.
Which is, it is an incredibly striking way to open a philosophical argument.
Seriously.
We are looking at a text from April 2024 titled An Ode to Utopia, and it's by the author Lifeng. And he doesn't just offer, like, a polite defense of the utopian concept.
No, he throws down a gauntlet.
Exactly. He argues that a nation without a dedicated group of people actively pursuing a utopian ideal is, in his words, a soulless species.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because our mission for this deep dive is to really explore why this author believes that abandoning the pursuit of utopia is the actual tragedy of our modern era.
Yeah.
And we're going to do that by examining his arguments purely as they are laid out in the text. We're going to look at his unsparing critiques of both past totalitarian regimes and, well, our modern free market democracies.
And we will be doing so completely impartially.
Yes, very important to note.
The goal here is not to endorse a specific political ideology or system for either side, but to map the philosophical architecture of his argument.
Right, we're just looking at the ideas.
Exactly. But to understand that architecture, we first have to address the elephant in the room, which is why utopia has such a terrible reputation today.
Oh, absolutely.
And the author, to his credit, does not shy away from this. He openly acknowledges the spectacular failures of historical utopian experiments.
He specifically points to Robert Owen's New Harmony community, right?
He does, yeah. A 19th century experiment that basically collapsed under the weight of its own internal contradictions.
But he goes even further than historical examples. He unloads this massive reading list of what he calls anti-utopian bestsellers. We're talking about the heavy hitters here.
Oh, yeah, the classics.
1984, Brave New World, Animal Farm.
This Perfect Day.
Right. The Handmaid's Tale, Lord of the Flies, Neuromancer. I mean, the list goes on. It reads like a syllabus for a class on why you should be terrified of anyone promising you a flawless society.
It really does.
Because, these books trained us to believe that the pursuit of perfection inevitably ends in surveillance or mind control or just horrific violence.
What's fascinating here is, well, it's how the author takes that exact cultural narrative and just flips it completely on its head.
How so?
So the traditional consensus is that these dystopian novels, alongside the very real totalitarian practices in places like, say, the Soviet Union, North Korea, or historical China,
Right.
we view them as definitive proof that utopia is a biological and political impossibility for humans. But Lifeng argues the exact opposite.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He insists that instead of proving utopia is unachievable, these dystopian visions and historical overreaches actually provide an invaluable comprehensive reference guide of what not to do.
Oh, wow. So he's treating, like, historical and fictional dystopias as a massive data set.
Yes, exactly.
It reminds me of the lore around Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb. People told him he failed 1,000 times. And his perspective was simply that he had successfully found 1,000 ways that didn't work.
That is a great analogy.
The author is suggesting that these failed states and terrifying novels pave the way for a real utopia by mapping out all the dead ends. Like, they give us the necessary guardrails.
They show us where the cliffs are.
Right. But I have to push back on the text here for a second.
Yeah.
Is it really fair, or even ethical, to look at the immense human suffering of totalitarian systems? I mean, the real-world loss of life, the oppression, the generational trauma.
Yeah, the real horror.
And just neatly file that away as a reference factor for our next social experiment. It feels like an incredibly detached, almost cold way to process history.
You are touching on the inherent tension in this kind of grand macro-level philosophy. It is an unapologetically utilitarian way of viewing historical trauma.
It really is.
However, the author's defense rests on his relentless focus on the future. He isn't dismissing or minimizing the suffering. Rather, he is arguing that if we throw our hands up in defeat and abandon the utopian ideal because of those horrors, then all of that suffering was truly for nothing.
Oh, I see.
By analyzing the mechanisms of totalitarian overreach, like understanding exactly how centralized power corrupted the ideal in the Soviet Union or China, he believes we extract the necessary structural data to build a society that actually works.
So to him, walking away is worse.
Exactly. He views abandoning the project as the ultimate disrespect to those historical failures.
Okay, assuming we accept that premise, that past failures are stepping stones rather than stop signs, the essay then pivots its focus directly onto our present reality.
It does.
Because the natural question you, or anyone listening, might ask is, well, things aren't perfect, but isn't the society we have right now pretty good? Why do we even need a utopia?
And he anticipates that exact defense. To dismantle it, he focuses on what he identifies as the three foundational pillars of modern, mainstream, global society.
Which are?
An open free market economy, inviolable private property, and one person, one vote democracy.
The big three.
Yep. And he actually starts by offering a massive concession. He explicitly states that these three mechanisms are highly effective.
He admits they work.
He does. He says that when realized, they bring prosperity, relatively clean governance, individual freedom, and they liberate human productivity. He outright admits this is the best operating system humanity has ever designed.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because he offers that generous concession only to completely pull the rug out from under it.
Oh, entirely.
He asks you to look closely at that first pillar, the free market, and he compares it to an open African savanna.
The animal kingdom.
Right. He literally asks the reader to visualize the animal kingdom foraging freely on the plains, where the strong inevitably devour the weak. And his central question is an environment based on the brutal laws of survival of the fittest actually the ideal living state for human beings?
The savanna analogy is incredibly disruptive because the free market is constantly celebrated for its natural efficiency, right?
Yeah, we praise systems that reward adaptation and punish inefficiency.
Exactly. But nature, as the author points out, is inherently merciless. On the savanna, if a gazelle is born with a limp, or if an animal is separated from the herd, it doesn't receive a safety net.
No, it gets eaten.
It gets eaten. Shifeng is challenging the underlying morality of a human economic system that operates on those exact same predatory frequencies.
We've essentially built a highly efficient National Geographic documentary.
Right.
The lions are still eating the gazelles, but we've dressed the lions up in tailored business suits, given them corporate titles, and rebranded the carnage as market competition.
Building on that, he targets the second pillar, private property. He acknowledges the baseline logic that property obtained through hard work and wisdom should be legally protected.
Makes sense on the surface.
It does, but the critique emerges when he interrogates the reality of how that accumulation happens over time. In a system built on centuries of unequal starting lines, who determines if property was truly obtained through legitimate means?
Right, should wealth built on questionable historical foundations be protected in perpetuity?
Precisely. He poses a very direct question. In this system, do the poorest individuals genuinely have a realistic opportunity to counterattack and secure a wealthy life? Or is the game rigged by the early winners?
Are we offering a genuine ladder to climb? Or are we just fiercely protecting the hoard of resources that the strongest lions have already claimed?
And that leads directly into his critique of the third pillar, democracy.
Yeah.
He argues that a one-person, one-vote system inherently tends to elect mediocre leaders.
Okay, that's a bold claim.
His assertion is that democratic elections reward those who cater to the vulgar, immediate wishes of the public.
Or politicians who pursue political correctness just to win a popularity contest.
Right, making it virtually impossible for a truly visionary sage to take the helm.
But hold on, I need to raise a giant red flag here.
Go for it.
In the very first section of this essay, the author warned us about the devastating totalitarianism of the Soviet Union and China.
He did.
So, doesn't hoping for an unelected visionary sage to guide society sound exactly like the fast track to the dictatorship he just finished criticizing? I mean, who decides who the sage is? How does that not just become tyranny under a different name?
This raises an important question, and it is honestly the central paradox of almost all utopian philosophy. You're essentially being asked to trade the slow, frustrating, but protected chaos of the democratic crowd for the assumed benevolence of a singular visionary.
Which is terrifying.
It is, but when we look at how the author defends this, we have to look at his definition of the sage. He isn't advocating for a military strongman or a political dictator who consolidates power through force.
Okay, then what is he advocating for?
He is critiquing the short-term incentive structure of modern democracies. If a leader has to constantly pander for votes every 2 to 4 years, they can never implement the multi-generational structural changes required to build a utopia.
So they're just putting Band-Aids on things to get reelected.
Exactly. The author's argument is that a democratic popularity contest prioritizes immediate gratification over long-term human well-being. He believes maximizing economic productivity, which the Savannah system does beautifully, is fundamentally not the same thing as maximizing human happiness.
And to prove that our current Savannah system is completely incapable of maximizing human happiness, the author zeroes in on the United States.
He does.
He specifically calls it the most perfect democratic system on the planet today, and he uses it as his ultimate case study to show where even the absolute best version of this model hits a brick wall.
He lays out a specific list of 8 problems that he insists remain entirely insoluble under our current paradigm. Let's walk through them to understand the scope of his critique.
Okay, let's hear them.
Number 1, theft and robbery. 2, dereliction of duty by officials and civil servants. 3, the old age security of the poor.
All huge systemic issues.
Yep. 4, drug use and trafficking. 5, class contradictions caused by wealth disparity. 6, the inner troubles, pains, anxieties, and worries of family members.
Wow, that one is so specific.
Right. 7, huge military spending. And 8, homeless wanderers.
So what does this all mean? Look at the incredible juxtaposition in that list. He's placing massive macro-level geopolitical realities like huge military spending and deep class contradictions right next to incredibly intimate micro-level psychological issues.
Like the inner anxieties and worries of your own family members.
Exactly. It is a wild choice to put the military-industrial complex on the exact same bulleted list as internal family drama.
It really stands out.
I want to ask you, the listener, right now. Look at that list of 8. Theft, corrupt officials, poor elder care, drugs, wealth disparity, family anxiety, military spending, homelessness. Which of those feels the most fundamentally unsolvable to you?
That's a tough question.
Which one do you look at and think, humanity is simply never going to figure that one out?
It serves as a brilliant thought experiment because these issues are chronic across every modern society. We manage them, we mitigate their damage, we pass endless legislation to dull their impact, but we never fundamentally solve them.
We just treat the symptoms.
Exactly. The author's underlying logic here is profound. He is arguing that under the Savannah operating system, these 8 issues are not bugs in the code. They are features.
They are built in.
They are the inevitable byproducts of a system based on survival and competition.
Let's connect those dots. How does the Savannah cause both military spending and family anxiety?
Well, the essay suggests it all stems from the same root of scarcity.
Scarcity. So military spending is just macro paranoia. Nations hoarding weapons because they are terrified competing nations will take their resources.
Right. And family anxiety is micro paranoia.
Yeah, in a free market system, the isolated nuclear family bears the entire economic burden of survival. If you get sick or, lose your job, your family risks falling into poverty.
That constant underlying terror of the Savannah is what causes the inner pains and worries.
That is the exact mechanism he is highlighting. As long as you rely on a competitive private property model, you will always have theft because there will always be artificial scarcity.
You will always have homelessness because housing is a market commodity rather than a guaranteed right.
So the author doesn't just list these problems to complain. He uses them to introduce his alternative. He presents a blueprint called the second home of Lifechanyuan.
Right, but if the Savannah is so fundamentally broken, does Veng actually offer a real blueprint to escape it, or is this just more philosophical theory?
That's the thing. He presents it as a concrete reality. He describes the second home of Lifechanyuan as a new production and living model that directly addresses the failures of past utopian attempts, like New Harmony.
Okay.
He emphasizes that this community model isn't just a theoretical white paper. It has existed healthily and vibrantly for 16 years.
16 years is a significant data point. We're not talking about a weekend retreat or a hypothetical thought experiment. That is a sustained, real-world community effort.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But for an audience eager to understand the mechanics, how does the essay say this second home actually solves the 8 problems? I mean, how do you eliminate the Savannah?
Based on the parameters he sets up in the essay, the solution requires completely dismantling the competitive incentive structure.
Entirely.
Entirely. To solve inter-family anxieties and old age security, a system like Lifechanyuan must theoretically operate on a collective stewardship model. You remove the crushing economic isolation of the nuclear family.
Right. If resources, elder care, and child rearing are shared collectively by the community, the fear of individual ruin vanishes.
Exactly. And to solve theft and wealth disparity, you abolish the accumulation of private property. When resources are distributed based on need rather than competitive prowess, the motivation for theft disappears.
And the gazelles are no longer at the mercy of the lions.
Precisely. He is claiming this life-genuine mechanism proves that utopia is possible right now, and his argument culminates with a direct challenge to the reader.
He states that it is ignorant and dogmatic for us to conclude that utopia is simply unfeasible if we refuse to even study models like the second home that are currently functioning.
He is demanding that we look at the new data instead of just blindly trusting the dystopian novels.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see the precise architecture of the essay's journey. It begins with a broad, almost poetic defense of human imagination, warning us not to be rats in a gutter.
Right, establishing the stakes.
Then it moves into a sharp, structural critique of global capitalism, pointing out the inherent brutality of our economic biology.
The Savannah.
Yes, the Savannah. And finally, it lands on a highly specific, localized 16-year-old experiment. It is a deliberate, intellectual journey from the abstract ideal to an applied, lived reality.
It truly is a massive journey, whether you are a leader trying to rethink the culture at your workplace, or you're simply sitting on your couch trying to make sense of a chaotic news cycle. This essay forces you to look around and ask a very uncomfortable question.
That we just settled.
Exactly. Have we accepted the daily brutality of the Savannah simply because it is familiar, rather than doing the hard work of striving for something genuinely better?
The author ultimately views those famous dystopian warnings not as permanent stop signs, but as vital navigational tools. They show us exactly where the cliff is.
But knowing where the cliff is doesn't mean you turn off the engine and refuse to drive any further.
You have to keep driving forward. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I promise to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Let's hear it.
It builds directly on something specific. The author included in that list of 8 insoluble problems. Remember number 6.
The inner troubles, pains, anxieties, and worries of family members.
Right. Utopia, by its very definition, is designed to solve all of that. It is engineered to bring total peace and eliminate struggle. But think about this.
Okay.
If a perfect utopian society actually succeeded, if a model like Lifechanyuan or something similar successfully eliminated all inner troubles, all societal struggles, all inequality, and all adversity. Oh, wait, no, eliminated all of that entirely. Would human beings actually be able to tolerate living in it?
Oh, wow. It is a profound psychological hurdle. As a species, we have neurologically evolved for millions of years specifically to solve problems, to hunt, to survive, and to overcome adversity.
Exactly.
Our brains are literally hardwired to release dopamine when we encounter a struggle and conquer it.
So if you take away all the struggle, do we just lose our minds? Would our innate biological need for conflict eventually cause us to tear our own perfect utopia down from the inside, simply to have a problem to solve?
It makes you wonder if our own neurology, rather than politics or economics, is the biggest roadblock to perfection.
It suggests that the ultimate obstacle to utopia might be our evolutionary biology. We might be animals that simply do not know how to exist peacefully once you take us out of the savannah.
So maybe the finish line isn't actually reaching a state of static perfection. Maybe the real point Kofeng is making is that the longing itself is what elevates us.
That is beautifully put. It is the active pursuit of an ideal that gives us a soul. Because, as he warned at the very beginning of the essay, a person without a longing for utopia is akin to a rat living in a gutter.
Indeed.
So the next time you look out at the world, you have a choice. You can stare down at the gutter and accept the dirt, or you can keep your eyes on the stars and try to build something better. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.